A lone pirate stands on a deserted beach, watching his ship sail away forever. This wasn't a second chance or a thrilling adventure. This was marooning, the most brutal punishment a pirate could face, a slow end designed to be far worse than any quick fight. He wasn't left empty-handed. His old crewmates gave him a few things: a small bottle of water, a gun, and just one bullet. It was a terrible choice they left him with: face slow starvation on a barren island, or choose a quick end. This punishment wasn't a captain's angry decision. It was pirate law. Many pirate ships had a set of rules called the Pirate Code, which every crew member agreed to. Marooning was the official punishment for the worst crimes. These rules were very serious. If a pirate stole gold from a crewmate or ran away in the middle of a battle, they had broken the code. Their punishment was to be left behind, a formal sentence decided by the whole crew. And they didn't pick a nice island with coconut trees and fresh streams. Pirate crews were expert sailors who knew every hidden corner of the sea. They would choose the worst possible place: a tiny strip of sand with no food. Sometimes it was just a big rock sticking out of the ocean. There was no fresh water to drink and no shelter from the burning sun. The pirates knew exactly where these desolate, hopeless places were. The choice of location was a powerful message to the rest of the crew. It showed everyone what would happen if they broke the rules. It was a way to keep order on a ship full of sailors living a dangerous life. You have probably heard stories about pirates making people walk the plank. It's a famous image from movies and books. But here is a secret that history tells us: that almost never happened. Walking the plank was mostly a myth. The real punishment, the one that truly terrified every person sailing under a pirate flag, was being marooned. Imagine the ship getting smaller and smaller on the horizon. Then it's gone. There is only the sound of waves and wind. The pirate is left completely alone, with nothing but silence and that heavy gun in their hand. But did anyone ever survive this terrible fate? It seems impossible. The most famous true story of a man left all alone on an island is not what you might think. It's about a sailor who was not a criminal. He was not being punished for breaking any rules. He stood on the shore and watched his ship leave because he chose to be left behind. His name was Alexander Selkirk. In 1704, this skilled sailing master had a huge argument with his captain. He was so sure the ship was unsafe, he demanded to be put ashore on a remote island. The island was in a lonely spot in the Pacific Ocean, part of the Juan Fernandez Islands. As Selkirk watched his ship become a tiny dot on the water, he suddenly felt a huge wave of regret. But it was too late. He was completely alone. He would stay on that island for 4 years and 4 months. Unlike a punished pirate, he had some tools with him, but his survival was still incredible. He started by building 2 small huts using wood from pimento trees. To eat, he had to hunt the wild goats that ran free on the island. At first it was hard, but he grew so strong and fast that he could actually outrun them. He used their skins to make new clothes when his old ones fell apart. Surviving was not just about finding food. It was about keeping his mind from breaking. He had a Bible, and he would read from it every day. He also sang songs out loud, just so he wouldn't forget the sound of a human voice. When a ship finally rescued him in 1709, the sailors were amazed. The captain, a man named Woodes Rogers, wrote that Selkirk had almost forgotten how to speak English. He seemed wild, like a part of the island itself. The lonely years had changed him completely. He could run across sharp rocks with his tough, bare feet. After so long in the quiet of his island, the noisy world of other people felt strange and overwhelming. And here is the most thrilling part of his story. Captain Rogers published a book about his journey, telling everyone about the wild man he had rescued. A writer in England named Daniel Defoe read this account. He was so inspired. He used it to write one of the most famous adventure books of all time in 1719. The stories Alexander Selkirk told after his rescue were amazing. They traveled across the ocean and reached a writer in England named Daniel Defoe. That writer listened to the true tale of a man's lonely survival. He took that incredible story and turned it into one of the most famous books ever written. The book was called Robinson Crusoe. This simple fact changes how we see almost every pirate story. When you watch a movie about a hero on a beautiful island, remember the truth. You are seeing a cleaner, friendlier version of a much harder reality. The real adventure wasn't always about a chest full of gold. For a marooned pirate, the greatest treasure was simply surviving to see another sunrise. It shows that pirate life was far more than just a grand adventure. But Alexander Selkirk was one of the lucky ones. He survived. Most did not. Take the story of another pirate, Edward England. He was left on the island of Madagascar with 3 of his crewmates. Their situation seemed hopeless. The island was huge and wild. They had nothing. But against all odds, they did something amazing. They found scraps of wood and slowly built a small boat. They actually escaped. They sailed away from the island that was meant to be their final home. But their story is famous because it is so rare. For nearly every other marooned pirate, the story ended right there on that lonely beach. So, this brutal punishment tells us something important. The world of pirates wasn't just wild and lawless. It was a community with its own set of very serious rules. Think about it. These were people who had rejected the laws of kings and countries. But on their own ships, they created a new society. A society with rules that were sometimes even stricter. In the end, Marooning is a powerful part of the pirate legend. It's a story not of buried treasure, but of survival. It reminds us that behind the myths were real people facing a brutal form of justice on the vast, lonely sea. The real story of Marooning is much darker than the adventures we imagine. It shows us that pirate life was not just about freedom and treasure. It was a world with its own harsh rules, where the greatest punishment was not a quick end, but being utterly alone. This truth changes how we see the skull and crossbones. It wasn't just a flag of rebellion. It was a symbol of a dangerous, self-governing world on the high seas. The stories we love often forget the grim reality. They focus on the swashbuckling and the gold, but the real pirates lived by a code. This code was a promise of loyalty, but also a warning. Breaking the rules had consequences that were far more terrifying than any sea monster or naval cannon. But marooning was saved for the worst crimes. So what happened for smaller mistakes? Pirates had a whole system of justice. These punishments were designed to be seen by the entire crew, serving as a powerful lesson to everyone on board. For less serious offenses, a pirate might be whipped or tied to the mast for a day in the hot sun. A more brutal punishment was called keel hauling. A sailor was tied to a rope and dragged under the ship from one side to the other. The sharp barnacles on the ship's bottom could cause terrible injuries. This system of rules reveals something amazing about pirate ships. They were not just chaotic gangs, they were floating communities. These harsh punishments were the only way to keep order when you were months away from any land or law. In fact, many pirate ships were more fair than the Navy ships they fought against. On a Navy vessel, a captain had total power. On a pirate ship, the crew voted on the rules and elected their captain. The brutal punishments were something they all agreed to live by. So when you picture a pirate ship sailing the ocean, think about this. It was a small, fragile democracy, held together by trust and fear. Every sailor knew the rules, and every sailor knew what would happen if they broke them. The famous pirate flag, the Jolly Roger, was a message to other ships, but it was also a message to the crew. It stood for the freedom they had chosen, but also for the brutal justice they had accepted. It was a symbol of their unique and dangerous world. And that brings us back to the lonely figure on the beach. Marooning was the ultimate punishment because it stripped a pirate of everything. It took away their ship, their crew, and their share of the treasure. It took away their entire world. So the tales of castaways are more than just adventure stories. They are the echoes of a very real and very brutal form of justice. They remind us that for every pirate who found a treasure chest, many others met a lonely end with nothing but the sound of the waves.